The other thing that you need to think about as a white label provider is it can't be a hobby. You have to understand that your regular agency processes don't fit in a white label world for the reasons like I just mentioned. So you have to have a white label process. You have to commit to it, resource it, and not think of it as a white label when I've got downtime and I'll take a lower rate of pay for it, but I'll use it in my downtime. It has to be an integral, intentional part of your business. And with that comes the commitment to scaling it, because that agency, if they use you as their white label partner, they want to be confident that whether they've got 1 client, 2 clients, 5 clients, you're not going to break. That if somebody takes a vacation, you don't break. If somebody's sick, you don't break. They're sourcing that responsibility for consistency, for reliability to you. And if you fail that just because of something as simple as somebody's gone off on vacation, that's not okay. Does that make sense?
It does. Question for you, Rob. Alex, kind of teed it up and said that, we're all service-based, and, we have a few of these partnerships together with partnered agencies. And in one specific case, we were clients of this partner agency before we decided to provide white label services. And when we came to the table, we presented to the leadership team and said, this is the offering. This is what Ditto does. We thought it was going to be a two-way street where we do an implementation for them and then have access to their clients who are also on the Asana platform and do implementations kind of as we went. And because we have good relationships with some of their team members, we started to hear things that were happening. And one of the things was that they saw the offering, they saw behind the curtain, so to speak, and decided to hire their own in-house implementers, right, integration specialists to provide this service to their clients. And so we're in a position now where there's redundancies, and obviously they don't need us anymore. But are there use cases for how to protect that IP and really position yourselves as that expert and protect yourself against those kinds of things?
There's a few things you can do.
Okay.
So let's start with the most boring first. But it's the one that almost nobody does, which is your contractual relationship with your partner.
Yeah.
A non-solicitation, non-compete is usually a good thing to have in place. Yeah. That protects your IP. It protects your ability as a vendor in there. It's particularly valuable if you've got a unique offer that they would find hard to get a replacement for. I mean, I don't know that many specialist Asana project build out agencies. I think you're probably hard to find some more.
Yeah.
So you're in a strong position there. There are now dozens of white label ad agencies. So somebody might not sign that term for us because they go, no, I'll go and hire these ones if I don't like you. So that's the first thing you can do. And just obviously good contracts are good contracts regardless of your business relationships.
Yeah.
And the second thing you can do is decide what you show and what you don't show. So decide where their touch points are, where you touch them and where they touch the client. And if you can, black box something behind it, that's a great thing to do because then they can't see inside it. So that is also a big help. If you've got any kind of IP that you can hide away, then I always would do. Not because you're trying to be underhand, but right to say you're trying to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So I think you can do both of those things. I think the third thing as well is if you look at your pricing models, agencies can penny pinch sometimes. And we've seen this where the pivot point for us in our agency relationships is when our fees with that agency equate to what they think a person is going to cost them full time.
Yeah.
That's the crossover point, because then they go, hang on a minute, you're managing 10 clients for me. If I hire someone full time, they can do 20 and my cost stays the same. What they don't see is the full on cost of the the hiring process, vacation cover, sick cover, tools, systems. and they can't see the evolution of your knowledge and your process.
Right.
But I'm guessing your process doesn't stand still. It gets better over time.
Right.
So I think if you can frame your process as a proprietary process, name it, stick a label on it, say, this is a whiz-bang project management system. It just happens to use Asana. Mm-hmm. And then you effectively could release upgrades to your system. Here's what we've learned from now implementing this with 50 clients, that we've managed to release 1.1 of the system because it's now better from that knowledge.
Right.
You can't do that internally. So if you step back and think about, it's one of the things we see as one of our biggest advantages as a white label, and over time this could apply to you too, is, I always use dentists as my example. We've just done a big data analysis of our dental clients, which analysed, I think it was 350,000 ad clicks and $1.5 million in spend across dentists. We were able to pull insights, data, and things that no one agency could ever get for themselves in a million years. So if you step back and look at the value of the thinking, the data, and the knowledge beyond the actual service itself, it's much harder to replace that. Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks. Like, even starting off with that boring stuff, right? Like, it's common sense, and I think we went into that conversation with a bit of trust, right? Because we were clients, and so we weren't thinking paperwork. But yeah, it totally makes sense, and solidifying that position. So yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, it's only just about every agency that doesn't do it right.
Sure. Rob, have you ever forced any non-competes with clients? What is your opinion and strategy around making a client of yours sign hey, we're not going to go and do the exact same service on top of another agency or contractor for a period of time?
Yeah, for us, we've only done one, and it was quite a specific, we've done a few actually, but one specific circumstance that we do it in. We will only put a non-compete in where we're creating dedicated teams of people. So a few of our larger relationships, they require us to put it requires more than one person. It's a team of 2 or 3 quite often. So in those relationships, the last thing we want to do is invest in a team, especially for them, set up custom service levels and all that kind of stuff for them to do exactly what Mark just described and go and hire somebody and internalize the whole thing. Because we've effectively built a business for them at that point. We've had exactly this scenario come up this year when I did the sales pitches for somebody. We did it on a webinar. We sold 30 clients in a weekend. But before we did that, we had to make sure we were ingrained into their business.
Got it.
And so that we've come across. We often get asked for it the other way, where agencies ask us for a non-compete and say, okay, you won't serve any other specialist agencies in this industry. In which case, we've always said no, other than if you have one or two, Google agencies, for example. There are 40,000 Google agencies, many of whom will service clients in their niches. To say we can't work with them is stupid. What we will say is if you have 1 or 2 specific competitors who are your direct competitors and who you pitch against, then we will not work with those for these kind of clients. And that's usually been sufficient.
Okay, got it. Yeah, the NDA is the other aspect of that. And if you do have any like templates that you have used in the past, any NDAs or non-competes that don't have any specific information, obviously, about your business and about the service, that would be super valuable if you share that with the group.
I'll happily share NDA documents for you. I'll also send you our terms and conditions for our kind of primary core offer, because it's a really good illustration of the way we lay them out. Is here's what we're responsible for, here's what you're responsible for, here's what your client's responsible for, here's what you get, and here's what you don't get. Because that's another thing that we often see with agency services, particularly with things like we do, and I'm sure it applies for anything else. If you don't tell people what's in the box, then they assume what they think might be in the box. And what they assume and imagine will often be different to what you done. And it's often predicated on their previous agency experience. So defining the ins and outs of a good service contract just makes perfect sense to us. For us, it's a product spec. For many agencies, it's a service, statement of work.
Yeah, and we did record a course on how to run a really well-oiled PPC service for your clients using either Rob or doing it yourself if you run PPC. So just posted it in the chat there. If anyone is interested in running a PPC service differently, or just more ideas, or if you don't run PPC right now and you'd like to, check out that course. It's super, super valuable. Some really good content there. And it's on top of CallRail and Unbounce, but obviously you can push and pull and do whatever you need to do there. So the conversation definitely progressed there really quickly. And I think we got into the weeds there and it was great. I mean, the contract stuff, I don't think about because obviously I'm not selling white label services, but I can imagine just ensuring that your clients aren't talking to people on your team, that your team isn't talking to their end client, that there is some sort of, something in writing that says, hey, we're in this together. Yeah. Talk to me about the retainer side of it. And to Marquis' point, it's like, okay, well, we are doing this project, but I want to make sure that you're not just going to learn how to do it and then go off and do it on your own. And in order to make sure of that, it's easier with PPC, less with building out an Asana setup. But talk to me about how you strategically sell a retainer to kind of keep that going and to prevent that, the negative.
Yeah, okay. I'll do that. I'll just touch on one thing as well with that, if I may, before I get into it, just before it goes out of my head, which is the relationship piece on this. Anything where you have long ongoing relationships with retainer-based clients, look for 2 key steps that you have to put in place for most relationships, otherwise they will hurt you. Thing number 1 is 2 points of contact on your side. So your account manager, whoever's doing the day-to-day work, and whoever somebody else senior, are mirrored on the client side. We have seen it before where our point of contact as a junior in the agency uses you as the buffer when they screw up. And so their boss only ever hears that you've screwed up, not the employee. And because you don't have the communication with the boss, you get fired. Because all they hear is a drip of negative, when it's actually not down to you. So that separate communication channel is essential, so you can not bypass that individual, be open and be transparent, but they know you're being open and transparent in the communications, so they can't throw you under the bus. It will happen. It's happened to us 3 times. It's annoying as hell. With that, the other piece that goes with it is whoever has that client relationship in an ideal world needs to be rotated out periodically and a new person rotated in. If not, they perceive the value in the relationship to be the value of that one person, not your organization and its skills. They see your organization's processes and skills as that one person's processes and skills. I know this is a closed environment, so I'll tell you this truthfully. We had to let go a very senior manager a couple of years ago now, who unfortunately had been the prime relationship holder for 2 of our larger accounts. We weren't contractually tight, so we had to do a deal with him where effectively he walked away with 30 clients of ours. And because the relationships he'd done a great job in building good relationships with these clients, and as a result, they still wanted to work with him because they saw our value as his value. And that's, I guess, one thing I just wanted to talk about, because while I didn't lose it. Going on from that to the question you actually asked, Alex, about that relationship over time with a retention contract.
Yeah.
I come back to what I said before about value beyond the delivery itself. Your expertise should be the thing that they value, because the one thing that they can't get is experience outside their four walls. So you know how other organizations, other agencies, and other clients work.
Mm-hmm.
You can feed back to them, agency A did this and did a great job, you should try it. Agency B did this, it screwed up, don't do that. Client C liked this or was this way, here's something you could learn or go and attack. So if you bring that additional perspective over and above the handles that you're turning each day to get paid by them for the service, it's much harder to replace that, because they can't get it themselves. And all it does is amplifies your authority positioning with them, your expert status, even if you are more open in showing the output. You can show them the output of the process, and that might be an Asana model, but they can't assimilate the thinking behind it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Marquis, do you sell a retainer when you do those project management builds?
We do not, no. The engagements typically take like 6 to 8 weeks. We price based on that time frame. It can go a bit longer depending on how many people they have on their side, jumping in and helping out, who's leading on the client side. Any retainer that does come in would be in the form of support right now. So we're coming in typically once a month, meeting with their core team, making sure systems are still working, if there are any updates to be made. But yeah, the retainer model isn't our core, but there are cases where it makes sense for that engagement.
Yeah, can I just jump in, Alex? Would that be okay? I would 100% had retainers onto that.
Yeah,
and there's money on the table there, and I think the way I would think about something like that is, even when you've followed your model, even when it's built out well with their engagement and support, two things will happen inevitably. Some things will work well in their organization and will be well adopted, some things won't, and people will change. Their goals and needs will change. I think maintaining that, and actually almost even becoming their accountability partner for how well it's performing, how well their team are managing deadlines, deliveries. There's a whole, I think, service that you might call it support, you might call it ongoing optimization, you call it anything, that actually adds value. Otherwise, anything that's a one and done will tend to die over time.
Yeah.
Got it.
Pretty good. I'm gonna look back into that.
Yeah, it might feel weird. I mean, I'm happy to pick up on it offline if you want at some point, and just talk through with you, spitball for half an hour what might make sense. But I think in anything like that, here's the thing that we always talk about in our world, and I'll use it as an example. So landing pages. We build tons of landing pages for our clients. But you never know what's going to happen to that landing page until you put it live. Even though it's proven, we've put it on accounts before. That one, it may work really well, it might not. So, okay, we'll tweak and we'll optimize it over time. And website designers, I think, are the people who leave more money on the table than anybody else, because I think it comes across as the most arrogant thing ever, that our one-time build of this thing was the best it could ever possibly be, and we're going to walk away for it once we bank the check. No, that's your first best guess based on your professional knowledge and information to that point. But your knowledge will grow, the business needs will change, and feedback from the website world will tell you things you can't possibly know today.
Yeah.
If you collect those things together, any website for my money that's not sold as a retainer is insane. That's kind of my thoughts towards them. And I think in your service, you could take some of those models and think about how to build it out.